Hello. So recently I saw this debate and it kind of blew my mind. This interaction people were having, and then I heard someone prominent saying something that was basically in agreement with this debate, and it kind of blew my mind that people are even saying this. And this is about words essentially. Words, what they mean, how we use them, the value of them. Words have value. Words have meaning. And if we're gonna distort what things mean, we're gonna really just play around with it. We're going to say, well, we can understand how this word can mean that because by default, the conclusion of it is that. We're using words in the wrong way. And then we're going to start saying things are bad because the conclusion is something else, which is a different word. And then we're going to get all mixed up with what we've been talking about with language or anything. And that's just a mess. That's crazy. And we do not want to be doing this as a society. I don't believe we do, at least. Um, what I'm talking about specifically, because you're probably wondering what in the world am I talking about, is preference and discrimination. I saw this group, they were talking about the difference between preference and discrimination, and it seemed that every single person in this group that was discussing this agreed that by default, when you prefer something, you're discriminating against another. And then I heard a prominent conservative commentator say the same thing, reading something off something else, and he's like agreeing with it. I'm like, this is a little nuts because what's going to happen is I can easily see how this transitions from how it's discrimination by default of preference to being preferences are discriminatory, and you can't have a preference. And if we, that's not a society I think anyone wants to live in. That you cannot have a preference because by default preference is discrimination, and discrimination is by default bad. This makes no sense. Yet we have people out there having these conversations now saying preference and discrimination are basically the same thing. They're they're basically synonymous with one another when they're not. When I prefer something, I have a liking for something. I prefer that particular thing. This doesn't mean I don't like other things. When you discriminate against something, you're having a preference actually for a thing you don't like. There are actually two actions for the same thing, just one's in the positive and one's in the negative. By having a preference for something, I'm not particularly discriminating for another. By discriminating for another, that doesn't mean my preference for I'm discriminating against can't be for something other that could be similar. I don't know, whatever it is. There are different things. These words do different things. That's what it comes down to. And the idea that I prefer, let's say I prefer chocolate ice cream, does that mean I'm discriminating against vanilla? Or strawberry or any other ice cream? If my favorite flavor, I prefer vanilla over any other flavor, that's discriminatory? Really? I'll still eat chocolate. I'll be in the mood for chocolate ice cream. Am I not discriminating against vanilla? Or is my discriminatory? First off, when it comes to discriminating, I think discriminating is actually a word in reference specifically to actual people. Usually, discriminating against races and different things like that. It has a very negative connotation to it that the word preference doesn't have, and we're gonna attribute that the negative connotation to that word to the word preference is pretty absurd. We should not be doing this. And I think if you hear anybody talking out like this, you hear anyone saying, well, by default of discrimination of preference, you're going to be discriminating, I think stop them in their track and explain this to them. Explain this is absurd, this is crazy. I'm going to have my preferences, I'm going to have things I prefer. It doesn't mean I'm discriminating against other things. But the things I do discriminate against, we'll have the conversation about that. They're two different things. Do not conflate them. That's basically the message I want to convey over here. And yeah, that's all I got for that. All the best, and thanks for watching.